Angus," Elizabeth said. "How does it feel to send 2 men to the slaughter to save yourself?" "They're being transported, no slaughtered," said one of the men beside Angus. Malcolm MacKinnon's dark features and frowning brows gave him a surly appearance. He was slightly taller than Angus, but much broader in the shoulders, though not so broad as was Gregory on Angus's left. Elizabeth smiled at Malcolm. "You cannot imagine how glad I am to know you view their fate in such a positive light. Now I needn't feel any compassion for you when your turn as Angus's sacrificial lamb inevitably arrives." She looked to Angus. "You can only dispose of so many pawns before you open yourself up to checkmate, you know. And I intend to be there when that happens." Angus's mouth pulled up at the side in a sneer, as it so often did when he was in her presence. It gave her satisfaction to know that her words were hitting their mark. Christina pulled on her arm insistently, and Elizabeth let her gaze linger on Angus as she allowed herself to be ushered out of the building. She would be scolded by her sister for her decision to speak to him, but someone needed to let him know that he couldn't continue getting away with his threats and crimes. Christina said nothing, though, as they made their way to the carriage, which would take them back to Dunverlochy Castle, 30 miles away. The 4 of them climbed into the carriage, a gift from Lachlan to Christina not long after their marriage, while Colm rode with the driver, Bannerman, at the front. Silence reigned inside as the carriage pulled forward and Bannerman navigated the traffic in the town. Christina's and Lachlan's hands were clasped together, resting on Christina's lap, just beside her rounding stomach. The sight of it reconfirmed in Elizabeth what she had said to Angus. He saw the baby she carried as a threat to his right to Dunverlochy Castle, and now that he had escaped the consequences of his attempts to remove the obstacles in his path, he was unlikely to suddenly give up the fight. "You mean to appeal the ruling, of course," Elizabeth finally said. Lachlan and Christina shared a glance, and Christina shook her head. "We do not?" Elizabeth stared, speechless for a moment. "You cannot be serious. You mean to let Angus run free, after everything?" Her sister said nothing. "Good heavens, Christina! If he'd had his way, both you and Glenna would be indentured in the colonies right now, or dead." Christina's prior maid, Glenna, shifted uncomfortably beside her, and Elizabeth looked to Lachlan. "I am surprised to find you so silent on the matter, Lachlan. You mustn't pretend you do not hate Angus just as much as I do." Lachlan's jaw shifted from side to side, and he looked down at the hand he held in his. "I have no liking for Angus, 'tis true, and I had certainly hoped for a different outcome today. 'Tis a miscarriage of justice, and I dinna like it one bit." He looked at his wife. "But we dinna wish to stir up more trouble. We promised to abide by today's verdict." Christina smiled up at him, then looked at Elizabeth. "We want peace." Elizabeth looked back and forth between them. "And you believe you shall find peace with Angus at large? Surely you are not so naive." "'Tis no naive to refuse to give him control of our lives and emotions," Lachlan said. "I only wish to protect my wife and bairn. I dinna care to spend any more time on a man so undeserving of it." Elizabeth kept her eyes on Lachlan. She heard his words, but she could see by the tightness of his jaw that they were not easy for him to say. It was not in his nature, either, to ignore a threat. "The way to protect them is to see Angus punished for his crimes," Elizabeth said. "That is the only way to ensure..."